What's up, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Today we're going to be going over the Dragons and BattleHawks game for the Week 4 slate on Saturday, looking at all the fantasy relevant players, giving you guys a start-sit analysis for this game. But hey, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button before we get started, which will be right now. Alright guys, so the BattleHawks have been playing pretty dominant on defense as we saw last week. This is yet another home game for them, getting to host the Dragons, who have been struggling on offense. So that mixture together has brought us the lowest over-under on the week at 38.5. And would you look at that, the BattleHawks are favored to win by 11.5 points. Now that's a pretty decent spread if you're actually betting on the spread. I'm not sure that I would bet on the BattleHawks to cover that. The Dragons aren't as bad as this over-under and this spread implies, but I do expect the BattleHawks to win this one pretty easily. I just think it might end up being more like an 8 or 9 point spread versus 11.5. So overall, though, this is going to be a game that might be a little bit disappointing for a lot of the fantasy options here, just because I would venture to guess that this one could still even hit the under, even with that already pretty depressed over-under total. But you guys are here for fantasy analysis, so let's get into the start sets for each of these teams. We'll begin with the Seattle Dragons. All right, so looking at the Dragons here, one important thing to note is that no team is allowed less touchdowns than the St. Louis BattleHawks, and Brandon Silvers has been very inconsistent through the first 3 weeks. St. Louis is also allowing the second least fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So Brandon Silvers, while I think that he can continue to get better as the league goes on, I would definitely look to pivot off of him if at all possible this week. It's just not a good matchup for you. Running backs, this three-headed backfield is really annoying. Fantasy football is hard enough when there's a two-headed running back by committee, but this three-headed backfield is making things really difficult. I think that Trey Williams and Kenneth Farrow should eventually pull away from Jaquan Gardner a bit, but none are really great starts this week until we begin to see a shift happen to more of a two-back committee. But if you had to start anyone here, I'm still confident enough in Trey Williams and Kenneth Farrow because they're getting volume in the passing game, which Jaquan Gardner is not getting. So even though they're splitting carries evenly, at least Williams and Farrow are getting targets, which brings up their scoring potential, especially with getting passing touchdowns each week. So overall, and just with the fact that Dragons receivers aren't being utilized too much in this offense, like Trey Williams and Kenneth Farrow, but I would avoid Jaquan Gardner. All right, looking at the wide receivers here, Keenan Reynolds has been getting consistent targets and consistent deep targets, so it's only a matter of time until he has a massive game. I don't know that I would predict a massive game here, but he's definitely good enough to start. And then Austin Proehl has had 2 really good games and 1 stinker, but I'd be comfortable starting both in this game. We'll definitely take Reynolds over Proehl just based on the amount of targets. And just with the fact that Proehl has the ability to completely disappear, as we saw in the Week 2 game against the Vipers, but Keenan Reynolds has at least been getting consistent targets each week. Can't really endorse anyone else, especially not the tight ends. We haven't seen anyone get more than 1 or 2 receptions each week. They've not been using them in high leverage situations at all, so this is not a team that focuses on the tight end, so just steer clear. Even if you have to start a tight end in your league, I'm sure you can find a better option. Looking at the defense as well, I would also avoid this one if you can. Seattle on the road, playing in a tougher environment with an offense that doesn't turn the ball over often, is just not a recipe for fantasy success. All right, let's jump over to the St. Louis BattleHawks. So I really like Jordan Ta'amu, need to preface that, but this might be another down fantasy production week. Similar to last week where he didn't have to do much to win, I would expect a very similar outcome this week. You probably don't have a pivot option because of how limited quarterback options are in this league. But check my rankings if you're curious. You might have someone that I have ranked higher than Jordan Ta'amu this week, just depending on your league settings. Now, that's not to say that I don't think he's going to have a good game. It's just not going to be something that gives you a high enough ceiling in fantasy that you're going to be pretty excited about. Now, looking at the running backs here, Matt Jones has been on absolute fire, but he's still dealing with that knee injury. He did not practice up to this point in the week. I'm still assuming he's going to get the start, but if he ends up not playing, then Christian Michael is a definite start in his stead. And if Matt Jones plays, you can probably still flex Michael in deep enough leagues since he's getting enough carries to warrant some volume. This is the only team that's running the ball as heavily as they are, so they're not going to rely solely on Matt Jones. Both of these guys are getting carries in the red zone, so anytime you start either Matt Jones or Christian Michael, you're basically exposing yourself to a high potential for running back touchdowns. So really like both of those guys this week, but definitely like Matt Jones a lot more. The wide receivers, similar to last week, if Te'amu doesn't have to do too much, then neither will the receivers. I'd still start Pearson L just based on his overall target volume and just how good he's looked, but I'd try to pivot off of Washington and Russell just this week. No team is allowing less points to opposing receivers. There's definitely going to be better matchups ahead. I still both like these guys rest of season. It's just not the week to start them. Tight ends here, pretty similar analysis as we had for quite a few guys, but if you have to start a tight end, I definitely start Lucas, but don't expect more than 3 receptions and just pray for a touchdown. As for the defense, this is my number 1 ranked defense this week. They have been honestly the best defense in terms of production allowed or lack thereof from the other team. It's the lowest over-under on the week. It's one of the most stifling defenses at home. Yes, I would definitely start the BattleHawks defense. Pretty much, I would start them over any other defense, and they're going to be probably the highest owned defense in DFS, and good reason for that. So just recapping this again, lowest over-under, I do expect the BattleHawks to win this one, but expect it to be a little bit closer than the current spread indicates. The Dragons aren't a bad team. They just haven't been able to put entire games together. They've looked really good in the first half and then have faltered in the second half in their 2 losses. So hopefully they can keep this one a little bit more competitive on the road. They're definitely going to need to pick up something now that the Wildcats are also looking good in the West. The Western Conference is becoming really strong right now, so the Dragons are going to have to start doing something if they want to compete for that second playoff spot, because I'm assuming Houston will get the first one. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you check out my website at fantasyaddictionnetwork.com. Get access to all my rankings, trade tools, everything you need to be able to manage a fantasy league, and hit that like and subscribe button for more XFL fantasy content. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.